Good afternoon, Master Brokers, once again. I am Ileana Abella, Chair of the MBF Miami chapter, and I thank you all for joining us for our third virtual panel discussion. Hopefully, this will be the last one for 2021. Be advised that this meeting will be recorded and distributed in a recap email sent to you soon. This will also be posted on our channel, our YouTube channel, with all of our past discussions. Rest assured that all the materials being presented here today, website slides, etc., will be distributed later on. Jason will take care of that. As we plan for future MBF activities, please know that we hear of your interest in resuming to in-person events. So do we. We are dying to do that. And that we very much want to do and have been talking about it. We will have some exciting news in the coming weeks and appreciate your patience on that front. In fact, my fellow board members and I are overwhelmed by your continued enthusiasm and membership, and by the number of the new master brokers that have joined us, that have joined our Miami chapter over the course of the past 2 years. With that, let's shift to our attention to today's discussion. We have learned a lot of lessons from these tragic events of June that happened in June in Surfside, and best practices for our industry with respect to older condominiums. We approach this topic with a focus on how to communicate and best represent our clients, with an emphasis on looking forward and not backwards. And we approach it with a profound sadness, as one of our own, Annie Alexander, good friend and master broker for a long time, lost one of her family members, her brother and sister-in-law, during this horrible event. Annie is joining us today and will have some word for us at the end of our presentation. Thank you, Annie, for joining us today. To help moderate this discussion, please welcome our fellow master broker, board member, ex-chair, Jeff Moore. Hi, Jeff. Jeff has chaired the Miami MBF for 7 amazing years and is a seasoned real estate veteran with more than 3 decades in the business. He has been instrumental in changing the way South Florida real estate is designed, branded, and sold, having introduced a modern loft concept back in 1990. Jeff's unique background in design, management, development, and sales, as well as his experience moderating several panels, plus his incredible sense of humor, makes him an outstanding choice to lead this discussion today. Master Brokers, please welcome Jeff Moore.
Thank you, Ileana. Thank you, everyone. It's nice seeing you virtually. It's been a while. Thank you for joining us tonight. Let's not mince words. I truly wish we didn't have to explore this difficult, complex topic. And I know many of you feel the same way. I'd much rather be learning about cryptocurrency or how Miami is successfully recruiting all of these tech and financial companies to open offices here. But it's important that we confront the challenging questions raised since the collapse of the Champlain Tower and learn from experts with good, accurate information. The future safety of South Florida condominiums is an issue that concerns all of us. As always, we've planned this discussion with you in mind, and we'll address all of the questions about older condominiums that have emerged in the months since the collapse. You'll walk away from this discussion with a clear understanding of what changes to expect regarding condo board management, certification windows, repair, reserves, the sale and marketing of units, and other related matters. Let's meet the panelists who will enlighten us on these issues. To give you a range of perspectives, we've invited a world-class structural engineer, author, and acknowledged expert on restoration and repair projects, the policy and legislation director of our city's incredible Realtor Association, and an experienced colleague who specializes in Surfside, its adjacent neighborhoods, and its diverse offering of condo residences. Greg Batista has been a licensed professional engineer for 30 years, a licensed general contractor for 20 years, and has held top management positions in world-class construction and development companies, having constructed several high-rises in Puerto Rico and Florida, He's also become a recognized name in the design and engineering industry by acting as the hands-on designer of record for large-scale commercial, residential, and concrete restoration and repair projects. Greg is frequently interviewed on CNN, NBC, CBS, Univision, Telemundo, and other networks when engineering issues hit the news cycle, as was the case this past June. He's authored several publications on these topics and is currently writing a book called Averting Disaster in Your Building, Learned Lessons from the Surfside Tragedy. Please welcome Greg Batista.
Hi, good evening. How is everybody?
Welcome, Greg. I'll continue on to our next panelist. Danielle Blake is the Public Policy Chief for Miami Realtors, where she's been shaping advocacy and legislation innovations for 16 years. Some of our longtime master brokers may remember Danielle speaking to us in 2007. I was just a child at the time. As we cruised the bay together aboard the Biscayne Lady and learned about property tax reform. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree from Florida State University, and upon graduating began lobbying with Robert M. Levy and Associates. Later, she joined the Secretary of State's International Affairs Office and served as a legislative assistant in the Florida Senate and the House of Representatives. Since the Surfside tragedy, Miami-Dade County's mayor and commissioners have asked Miami Realtors for reports on condominium transparency and post-disaster market updates, which she'll be sharing with us today. Thank you for joining us once again, Danielle.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Welcome. Finally, let's welcome Master Broker Joelle Oaknine, who's been practicing real estate since 2003 and has been associated with One Sotheby's since 2010. She's very active in Surfside and its surrounding neighborhoods, having sold several pre-construction condos in the Surf Club, Four Seasons, Oceania, and the St. Regis Bal Harbor. Joelle sold one listing in Champlain Tower North and another in Champlain Tower South in 2020, and is grateful that the new owners were not in town at the time of the collapse. She was honored to volunteer her time on behalf of victims and survivors after the tragic events of June 24th. Raised and educated in Montreal with a Bachelor's of Science degree, Joelle began her career in the high-tech computer gaming industries in various sales positions before pursuing a real estate career. Please welcome Joelle.
Hi.
Hi, Joelle. And this is Joelle's new condo. How do you like it? I'm kidding.
It's not really. It's a beautiful background.
It's gorgeous. As Ileana mentioned, please remain on the Zoom at the conclusion of the discussion to hear from our colleague, Annie Alexander. Let's begin. And let us start with, it's always ladies first. So let's do gentlemen first for a change. Right, Greg?
I guess you're the boss.
Okay. Sometimes. Building techniques have been the same for centuries, and some buildings are still standing literally thousands of years after being built. What makes an old building unsafe? Is structural stability a problem unique to South Florida?
Well, structural problems are not unique to South Florida. There have been, ever since the first cavemen were building caves, they've been a problem. They've been a problem ever since the Egyptians were building the pyramids. There are actual records that show that, there were several iterations before the pyramids became what they actually were. So yeah, it's an evolving process. And what makes a building unsafe? It's basically a professional, somebody competent, whether it's an engineer, an architect, contractor, somebody that knows actually what they're doing, to go in and say, look, you have a problem, and it's up to them, or the authority, as the Florida law states it, to state that publicly that a building is unsafe. And is structural stability a problem unique to South Florida? No, I've been after the Haiti earthquakes. I was there a couple of days after, and that is like on the extreme end of places where it is an extreme problem. United States is getting there with the crumbling infrastructure and what's going on. If nothing's done to take better care of our buildings, to fund buildings that have problems, then yeah, the Surfside will be just the tip of the iceberg.
It's really a combination of engineering, construction, and then maintenance, correct?
That is absolutely right.
Okay. Danielle has a presentation for us. It'll take a few minutes. So Danielle, please talk talk to us rather than us asking you questions and share your presentation with us.
Sure. I think one of the first questions we asked is, how is Miami Realtors responding to the tragedy? So I see a lot of familiar faces here. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be with you today. And I wanted to share my screen real quick with you and show you one of the things that we created to help you. So immediately after Surfside, we started receiving, oh boy, let's see. What are you looking at?
40-year building.
Looks like your website.
Let me try it again. Okay. Yep. Are you seeing the 40-year recertification?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good. We're on the right screen then. So immediately we started getting phone calls. I want to get the 40-year recertification. I want copies of the structural engineering reports. How can we get this? And so we sent 2 emails out to our members. Hopefully you received them, and said, for one, this information has never been public before. So internally, the building departments, they have this information, but it's never been publicly shared. So the first phone call that we made was to George de la Paz. I don't know if you guys remember him. He's with the University of Miami, and he left to be with Mayor Levine Cava's. He's a senior advisor with the mayor's team now. And so talked to him and asked him, is there something that you could do to take those internal documents and publish them so that members of the public who are asking, buyers that are coming in, they want these structural engineering reports, but more importantly, residents who are living there want to feel safe. And so what kind of information could you provide for them? So we created this 40-year building recertification. And if you come down here and click on this website, you're going to see this, the 40-year recertification portal. Are you guys seeing that information?
Yes.
Usually I have a green screen around it, which shows me exactly what you're looking at, but it didn't appear today. So it just, looking at one of them, for example, the Jockey Club condo, if you go in and you look at all the cases there, you'll see that this building was built in 1968 and their first 40-year recertification was back in 2008. So if you click on that case, this is the information that you're looking for. Both the structural and electrical report were approved on this date back in June in 2008. And so you'll see their letter of recertification was approved on June 27th. So you'll see this building has gone through its 40-year recertification. Well, it's been more than 40 years now. They're due for their 50-year recertification. So you come here to 2020, which was just last year, and you'll see they also got their letter of recertification. So this helps put the information out there. This is for you that you can absolutely share with the buyers or with the current residents that are calling you and asking for information. The information is there. What is not here yet is the structural engineering reports, which a lot of people want to get their hands on. So Lourdes Gomez, who's the building director with Miami-Dade County, told me 2 weeks ago that they are going to be updating all of the information, the reports that are submitted with the permits will now be displayed here on the public portal. So you'll be able to access those structural engineering reports as well. And then if we go back to the website real quick, that's only for Miami-Dade County. If you're looking at a municipality, we did call Lázaro Solis with the property appraiser's office and Pedro Garcia's office, and they put out this list. If you click on the list, you're going to see all of the municipalities, all of their building department information, a telephone number, a contact name for the building department, along with that building director's email address. So again, it's about transparency and putting all this information out there. And so you can contact the municipality directly to get that. Our hope is we are working right now with 2 county commissioners who are filing legislation to require the municipalities to turn that information over to the county. So that portal that I just showed you, all of the municipal information for the buildings would also be in the main portal for the county. So this was absolutely implemented from our association, and it was all about transparency and getting the information out there.
Phenomenal information, Danielle. Thank you.
I do have one more I'll share, but
Please,
I think it goes with, okay. And also we were working on, real quick, show you.
Danielle, can you put the links, please, on the chat?
Sure. I'll absolutely post it there. It's miamirealtors.com/40-year. And let me, perfect. Okay, so we just discussed the 40-year recertification and the structural engineering reports. And so the second question that we get, And this is something that we've been working on with Florida realtors, our state team, and specifically responding to the Florida bar. So the Florida bar has put together an ad hoc committee to look at, from a legal perspective, what is it that we could be doing different? And some of the information that we shared with them is that there were 22 sales and 8 rentals in the building 12 months prior to the collapse. So the question is, what exactly did these people know before? Because would you have gone forward with this sale if you had known that the building was in imminent danger of collapsing? If you had all that information that they were due for a special assessment, would you have still moved forward with that? And so those are the types of issues that we're looking at. And the first thing I will tell you that we learned is what info do they really have accessible? And this is really important. Let me show you. Okay. Do you see this where it says each prospective purchaser?
Mhm.
Okay. This is really important. Each prospective purchaser who enters into a contract for the purchase of a condominium unit is entitled at seller's expense to all the governing docs, budget information, all of that. So our position has always been that the buyer needs those documents in advance in order to make an offer. After getting into a contract is really too late. So that's one of the things that we've been advocating for. And then also another law I want to share with you. Oh, give me a second real quick to switch back over. Is this one. There was a law that passed a couple years ago starting January 1st, 2019, and it required 150 units or more to have a website, or now they added a mobile device so that the unit owners can have access to these documents. Anybody want to know, take a guess, how many units were in Champlain Tower South?
How many units were they? 108?
How many units? 135.
35.
135, less than 150. So they were not required to have a website under the law and to have these documents available to the unit owners at any time of the night. And so that's one of the things that we're also pushing for, is to lower this number from 150 down to 50. So I'll stop sharing and get off the slides and all the information stuff and answer your questions more openly.
Great. We'll come back to you. Thank you so much. That was great. Joelle, since we have members from across the region who may not be familiar with Surfside, Bal Harbour, and the surrounding areas, please describe it generally and what the condo market was like pre-June 2021. What was the state of play for condo buyers, sellers, agents in Surfside immediately after the collapse, and how are things at the moment?
So Surfside is just a small little town next to its big sister, Bal Harbour. Up until 2009, and even recently, until the recent spurt of new condominiums, it's been a sleepy little town with small units, 3 to 500 a square foot. Suddenly in 2017, there was a spurt of new construction at 1,500 to 3,000 a square foot. Just after prior to COVID, prior to the collapse during COVID, things were moving at an incredible speed. Nothing was staying on the market. All these old buildings, the Champlains were selling. I had 2 listings. The one in Champlain South, I have to say that we were almost in contract a couple of times. We did raise the price more than once, and we ended up selling at a very fair price. Thank God the people weren't in there. Nothing was staying on the market. And the year prior to COVID, it was very difficult to get anybody in there. So things were selling. I think there were about 60 sales from January through June 24th. Right after, it was just shock. Everybody was in shock. Nobody knew what to do. There were no sales. Things started moving again a few weeks after, but there were no sales. The whole community came together. Young, old, wealthy, not wealthy, everybody was volunteering. Nobody wanted to buy. If you're asking me now, I know, for example, Champlain South and North are sister buildings. And even though North has been declared, they're not final through their reports, but they don't have, although they were built the same way, they didn't upkeep it as shoddily as the South. I sold a unit in there, and the wife is afraid to move in. The husband wants to, the wife is afraid. She wants to sell it.
So the building is still occupied?
It's
People
still
are living
occupied.
there?
And people are living there. They don't want to move. They are actually in construction. They bought a three belt direct ocean. They're in middle of construction, so they haven't lived. But I have friends who live there. There's a 1-bedroom that was way, way overpriced. Everything was moving and prices were going up constantly. Everything came to a dead stop right after. There are about 16 units pending now in contract in Surfside. A lot of them are in the lower price range, I would say under 2 million, because you have that big disparity between the older buildings and the newer ones, of course. And there have been some price decreases, but things are moving. They're not moving at the pace that they were, but people are afraid to go into some of the older buildings. They're asking a lot of questions. Of course, what's going on? How do we know it's safe? What do we do? There, like I was saying, there's a 1-bedroom that was in the North Tower that was overpriced at $795. They just lowered it to $599 because not everybody wants to go there.
Thank you, Joelle.
You're welcome.
Greg, was the Champlain Tower collapse an extremely rare anomaly that is unlikely to happen again, or is there a real danger of future collapses in South Florida? Greg?
Greg.
He's muted. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
There you are. Thank you.
Yes, it's if you ask any engineer worth his salt that's been around for a while, and yes, it's an extremely rare event. I'm talking about in the United States of America. But like I said before, this is something that could happen again if legislation is not passed, if certain rules are not passed, if certain things such as that Danielle was talking about are not passed. Because there is a certain susceptibility for the buildings in South Florida, particularly to have this, to undergo these anomalies. And it has to do with the engineering practices that occurred way back when, the construction practices that happened way back when, and even, the construction practices, the engineering practices, and the maintenance. Those are three main issues that are at the foundation of why this happened.
I'd like to add something. When I sold the listing at Champlain, and then, this happened shortly after, my seller was telling me that she was on the board for a couple of years and she just had to get off the board because they knew that things needed to be fixed. And every time there was a meeting, people would scream and yell at each other and people didn't want to spend the money. She told me some people had spent $100,000 years ago on their unit. They either didn't have the money or didn't want to spend it. So
yes,
I'm not an engineer, but I think it has to do not only with the building and how it's built, but also the upkeep of the building.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you this, and I've been doing this for 30 years and I've met with hundreds of condo boards. I've done thousands of 40-year recertifications, literally, me and my company. And I've been dealing with boards. I've been dealing with hundreds and hundreds of boards. And what you're saying is absolutely correct. There's a lot of time either through ignorance or just plain indifference, or just that you just don't have the money. There's no mechanisms in place so that people have to pay into their reserves. There's not that mechanism. I know that, for example, Canada has laws that requires people to put money in the reserves, and all of a sudden, if you get people just looking at the bottom line, then you're going to get that. And when people are confronted with sudden assessments and things like that, then yes, just hell breaks loose.
Danielle, what should agents do to protect their customers and themselves?
Ask
moving
for
forward?
information. Ask for as much information as you can possibly get and make sure that people are reading the information. So
what type of information?
Governing docs primarily. You want to look at that to see what the rules are for the regulation. And there's kind of a pecking order for hierarchy. So it's the developer's declarations first and any amendments. The second are the bylaws and any amendments for that. The third are the rules and regulations. You want to get any budget information. You want to get copies of minutes from the meetings if those are available. And I know there was already a post that those are difficult to get. All of it is difficult to get. One of the things that we've proposed and are really pushing for, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but in Hollandale Beach, they passed an ordinance back in 2020 that requires all associations in the city to submit their documents to the city, and then the city publishes them. So you can actually go to Hollandale Beach's website, the municipality's website, and you can pull up all the governing docs, the budget information, find out who's on the board, contact information for them, a manager if they have one, even the insurance agent's information is on there because that's all the information that they require. So we're hopefully taking that model to either the state level or to Miami-Dade County. We're going to have our first hearing in October in Miami-Dade County to see if we can implement a model like that here. And it would be countywide.
Obviously, agents are busy showing property and contracts and inspections. Are you saying that agents should be the one checking on these individual buildings, or the information be given directly to buyers, whether they request it or not? How do we handle this in a timely manner?
So how do we handle it now? So the condo writer, and it's, on that, it's what the purchaser is asking for. So the purchaser has to ask for the documents. We're hoping to change that in this point. So the seller is the one who's required under law to provide it, but I'm going to give you an example. What if I'm selling my unit and I've had those governing docs in the drawer for 15 years and I provide them? Who's making sure that it's accurate information from today and that information hasn't been amended? The custodian of those documents is the association itself. And as they always say, source the source. The source should be the community association, the association itself, because they're the ones that have the current information.
Thank you.
I've asked Jason to post a website where somebody can go, you can go. It's from My Florida License, and it gives you rules and regulations. And currently, if an owner or the registered agent asks for minutes or any of those financials, they have in writing, the association has 10 days to reply and provide those. I know it's been very difficult many times with the older buildings to get that information.
You also have to be very specific in what you're asking for. Because if you say, I just want access to the docs, they'll tell you, you can come to my office in 10 days and I'll open up a storage room with all of these boxes and good luck, have fun. By the way, you've got 2 hours. So you have to be very specific. I am looking for the minutes from all the meetings for the past year, for example.
Okay.
Jeff, I'm sorry. It would be awesome if Daniela could actually write that of what she would request for an association that we could copy and paste, and all listing agents could actually ask that when they take a listing, is send it automatically to the association, have it in a Dropbox ready so that when the time comes for the sale, the listing agent provides it right away. Because I mean, honestly, that's what should happen.
So we have a legal counsel, Sharmati Mami is her name, and she actually put that together for our board in a PowerPoint slide presentation. So what I'm going to do is copy what she posted. Jason, can I send it to you and you could share it with everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. No problem.
Thank you.
Perfect. Greg, where do we get a checklist of things that buyer's agent should be aware of? Is there something like that in existence within a building?
Greg.
Okay, let me just start by saying that buildings are very complex beings. I mean, people just see them as a bunch of concrete put together, but they're actually like a human body. You've got electrical systems, plumbing systems, and they need good, taken care of. Now the question goes back to, I lost my train of thought here.
We talked about what should agents do to protect their, I'm sorry, a checklist for buyers, owners, agents.
Okay, going back to the checklist. And that being said, these are very complicated things. The plumbing systems can get damaged. The electrical system can get damaged. There's literally millions of things that can go wrong in a building, and you're not going to find a checklist that's comprehensive enough. Although there are certain items that comprise 90% of the issues that happen in a building, and they typically encompass either in the what we call the envelope, which is everything having to do with the shell of the building, what keeps the rain out, what keeps the water out. And
the structure.
Of course, well, no, not the structure, because the structure's inside also. But I'm talking about the actual envelope of the building, what keeps the rain out and the wind out. So you've got your windows, you've got your paint, you've got the caulking, expansion joints. Those are things that are out in the open that 90% of the time that you have issues, it has to do with electrical or something having to do with the with that kind of exterior system that I'm talking about. But I will tell you, I provided I provided the host with these 4 books that I wrote that have to do with things that happen in buildings. Actually, one of them is called 40-Year Recertifications. And it's a guide, basically, it's made for property managers, realtors, residents, board members, people who don't necessarily know a whole lot about these topics, and questions that I've been getting for the last 30 years. And then I find myself answering the same questions over and over. And these books, they actually provide these checklists. And I found that many people call me and tell me, look, this is a great resource. So I don't know if at the end of this meeting, maybe Jason can provide these to the attendees.
So Greg, I just shared all of the files that you mentioned in the chat room. And I shared Joelle's PDF that she mentioned earlier as well on the chat. You should be able to download them directly from the chat. But we will have all of these documents in our follow-up email to all members that will be sent next week.
Thank you, Jason.
May I add something? In 2020, when I was working to try, I had this listing and we had no clue what we kept asking, the owner kept asking, I was nothing. We had no information. We finally got assessed while we were in contract at $100,000 for that unit. But the buyers, every single buyer came through. Nobody was even paying attention to what was being done structurally. It was, oh, the lobby's going to be beautiful. They're going to change the pool looking. They're going to change the hallways. Nobody considered the structure. That's supposed to be part of what the association takes care of, and you just trust them to do it. And that's a big problem.
Sounds like you had not the best board over there.
It was a bit different.
Unfortunately. Joelle, what did you do to reassure your client at the North Tower?
I'm not, frankly.
You're not.
How can I reassure them? The wife is afraid. I have friends who live in there. I have a good friend who perished. Her whole family and her daughter died in Champlain South. I can't guide them. I can't tell them to feel safe in that building.
No,
they have to make their own decision if the wife doesn't want to move in. I mean, it has been kept up completely differently than the South was. They have kept up with everything. Almost every building, not almost, every building went out and got a structural engineering report on their tower after. And those are all being compiled. So, I can't tell them. They have to do what they feel. And if they're not comfortable sleeping at night, then what's the point?
Of course. What kind of interest are you getting? Where are the buyers coming from for Surfside now? What type of a buyer is interested in buying there, considering?
So, we had Surfside happens to be a more religious area for them. It's mixed, but a lot. So we were getting a lot of that from New York, depending on the tower, of course, not at Surf Club. But this happened just before summer. People got vaccinated, people left, they went back to New York, they went back to their hometowns. So things are quieter now. We're expecting it to start up again in the season, and the Canadians are coming back. For the most part, before all this, it was all New Yorkers. I had a buyer from Texas, but mainly all New Yorkers.
Are these the same types of buyers that you would have had 2 years ago? Or are these people looking for deals because of the situation today?
Today, if they're going to buy in an older tower, they're looking for a deal. Correct.
Right.
Not as much in the new towers. In the newer towers, they feel more safe. But yes.
Thank you. Danielle, what can we do to support legislation to enforce mandatory condo reserves for repairs like this?
So we don't have any legislation yet. As you know, today is the 3rd day of committee meetings in Tallahassee. And so we're hearing rumors that there is going to be a Surfside bill, a big package that has a lot of stuff in there. We did have one bill that got published today from the Senate side, and it's creating a condo fraud task force, because as you guys know, one of the big issues that we have is enforcement. We have a lot of laws on the books right now, but what happens to the enforcement side? And so just mentioning that, speaking of laws, for reserves, there's actually a requirement in law right now that any expenditure over $10,000, you have to set aside reserves for that. But then the same law in a subset says you can waive those at less or no reserves on an annual basis at a duly called meeting by the majority of members who are present. So it's a very low threshold to waive those reserves. And again, in the downturn of the market, 2008 timeframe, a lot of associations were just trying to survive. And so that became the customary practice of our market, is to waive reserves. And we still see that today. Even though it's been 13 years, a lot of them have not started funding the reserves like they should, because it just became too easy to waive it.
But moving forward, we're hoping maybe that we don't allow condo associations to waive reserves.
I'm going to be honest. I haven't seen anyone put forth a bill, and I haven't seen any lawmaker push for it yet. This is a very hot potato, as you can imagine. And I think one of the other questions is what happens, like you just mentioned, people in Surfside who bought their unit for $100,000, they can't afford this. So those are the voters that elect the people, and it's going to be very difficult to get something like this pushed. The one thing that we've been pushing for years, and just to put it in perspective, is, and you know this from the condo financing, you have to put a minimum of 10% into a reserve account in order to qualify for the full review process, which allows the buyer to come in with less down payment. We haven't even been able to get support for that at the state level from lawmakers. They just see this as a real political hot potato.
So the future doesn't seem super bright regarding the maintenance of our older towers and even our newer towers.
It's a touchy subject.
Touchy subject.
Right.
I have a question. Do you think they'll take the how do I say this, the maintenance of the structural element of the building away from the association and bring it to the city, and leave, for example, the carpeting, the hallways, to the association? Do you think that'll happen?
I don't.
No.
What they are talking about is dividing up the 40-year recertification. And by the way, I just want to mention, because this was one of the questions on the chat about having a drop-down field for the 40-year recertification. And specifically, when you have these fields, are they mandatory or not? And so just so most of you probably know by now, Miami-Dade and Broward are the only two counties that have this 40-year recertification process. And our MLS covers multiple counties. So you start asking Palm Beach listings for a mandatory field about a 40-year recertification, they have no idea what you're talking about. And even when we've had conversations with Florida realtors about taking this requirement statewide, immediately we get pushback from Central Florida and from the Panhandle. They don't want this. So at the local level, for the county commissioners, they have talked about maybe separating this. Instead of having a 40-year, make it a 25-year notification with a 30-year certification. So you have to have everything done within 30 years. And then at the 25-year, the first thing we're going to look at is maybe the roof or the concrete, or start separating it out by priority.
Why not a 10-year general inspection on every building? Something we inspect elevators every year. Why not inspect buildings every 10 years?
Well, I would love that for one. I would love that because it's great for business. But
Greg,
the
if we push it through, you'll make us all partners, Greg. If we can get this done, thank you.
I don't have, right. Even before Surfside, I couldn't handle the workload. But now after Surfside, I've hired 2 engineers just in the last 2 weeks, and the whole system is on overload, including the building departments. So yeah, it's a challenge.
How often do you think buildings should be inspected completely?
Well, let's start from the framework where, for example, I built a condo 20 years ago, a high-rise condo, 20 years ago, a 40-story high-rise. That's where I met Andres Acion, who my friend who's just I saw. That's where I met him.
You still curse that day, or?
He's a good dude. We were much younger back then. But I built that building, and 10 years after we built it, I saw that they were doing concrete repairs on that building. And sometimes I see buildings that are 40 years old and they are in excellent condition. So let's start from the fact that at the end of the day, that the people have to maintain their building. And I think that the root of the problem is that that money is set aside. Money is set aside for that. So yeah, whether a building's 10 years old, 5 years old, or 100 years old, it needs to be maintained. And one building, a 100-year-old building, might be in better shape than a building that was built, 20 years ago. So the answer is I really don't know, and I don't think that I'm the arbiter of that as much as my experience says. But now that there's a lot of people talking about it, maybe somebody will get the political courage to step up and get the right people, the politicians, the people from the city, the engineers, the architects, the building owners, the realtors, the property management associations, put all those and do a brain trust and come up with the right number. I'm not.
But if the state came to you and said, we're going to mandate an inspection for every condo in Florida every X number of years, what would you recommend?
I would say that 40 is a good number, but again, I would be much more confident. I would be much more confident that if there was some way where people are required to put aside an amount for reserves, and maintenance is absolutely key for that. And if that was set, I guarantee you, if that would have been in the cards back when Surfside was built, I guarantee you this tragedy would not have happened.
And Greg, let me talk about that for a minute, because you say put enough. I mean, how much is enough? And so right now,
great question.
Even if you're doing 10% of the budget, we just went through this. This is my first year on our homeowner association, but we've been putting aside 10%. So reserve studies, if I can touch on that for a minute, that's what's going to tell you if you have enough money going into it. So back in 2008, the legislature did pass a requirement requiring reserve studies to be conducted every couple of years. And then that was in 2008. In 2010, they came back and repealed it because what happened, I just talked about it, downturn of the market, associations were trying to survive, and it cost over $2,000 just for the study. They said they couldn't afford it. So the legislature repealed it. But how much is enough? You're never going to know unless you have a reserve study that tells you that.
Correct. Absolutely 100%. But 10% is better than nothing. And most people they're just defaulting to that from, what you said earlier.
Right. And I also want to throw in that a lot of buildings are self-managed, which that's a whole different topic.
That's a whole other ball of wax. Yep.
How can a condo owner, buyer be sure that the association is hiring the most competent engineer or contractor and they're doing their best possible job, especially since board members tend to award contracts to the lowest bidders? Greg or anyone else that cares attention.
Well, they should read my manuals, my books, the ones that you have there. And and when there's a recurring theme in these books that I wrote is that you need to hire the right professionals. And a key part of that is to write out an RFP, a request for proposal, that asks for, what are your qualifications, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, one of the problems is that, as opposed to commercial owners who have experience and knowledge in real estate and understand certain things, these people, the people on regular boards, they're all, they're volunteers. They don't, they're doctors, nurses, teachers. They don't know about these things.
Or retirees that don't have anything to do, right?
They're retirees, exactly.
Yeah, looking for a social life, unfortunately. Okay. Danielle, do you want to add anything on that? Or Joelle?
Oh no, staying away from that one.
Staying away from that one. What role can the Miami Realtors play to ensure stronger condo safety in the years ahead, Danielle?
I think, we've sent out a couple surveys responding to that information, and sending us what you're hearing in the market is really important. This wasn't related to structural integrity, but in the pandemic, you remember that the state invoked what do they call it? Emergency powers for associations. They were blocking access to the building. So when you start contacting us and telling us, hey, we can't even get into our listing. And I think the craziest story we got was, I can't get out of my building. I already closed and they won't let me use the service elevator. So we started collecting stories. We had 800 people email us stories like this. So my point is that when you start telling us stories of what's happening in the market, crazy stories as they are, they resonate with people. So I'll put it in the chat, put my email address, but if you can send me your crazy stories, then we can start passing that on to the legislature and advocating for change.
Thank you. I hope that they listen.
I have lots of crazy stories.
Oh, Greg, I think we might need drinks over this.
Joelle, how have your marketing practices in Surfside changed since the collapse?
I can't say that I've changed my marketing practices. What I do is I do advise people, if you want to buy into this building, you need to ask XYZ. And those are, you know, they used to ask just for, most people don't even read the condominium, the condo docs. You need to ask for the condo docs, the reserves, the minutes. I've made a list of new requirements that they need to ask for before we buy into one of those buildings.
Right. And is anybody actually taking the time to read anything?
I don't know. Some people send it to their attorney. Who knows? I have some people who are thinking of buying into the older towers now, thinking that they're going to be bought out by a developer and cash out.
And torn down, possibly.
Down and
Right.
cash out, which I think might happen. That's what they're saying, is that some of these buildings, if they don't have the funds to do what they need to do, they'll just opt to sell out.
I think that makes sense. I think you're going to see a lot of that in the future.
I think so.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yes. I have a question following up on what Greg said. So basically, from what I'm understanding, since there's no particular standard to construction and maintenance from any sort of a government body, it sounds to me that it's dangerous. Like what you're saying, it sounds like it's dangerous to be in a condo. Is that what I'm hearing from the panel?
I live in a condo. I don't feel.
I live in a condo too. I don't feel in danger, but I'm just like, since there's no bench line or there's no particular, I mean, it sounds like it's a random thing. Like, you know,
you're saying they're unknowns. They're unknowns.
There's a lot of unknowns, and there's not like all these things that you're asking for, the minutes, and so on. That doesn't really tell you that the building was going to collapse. I mean, even the Champlain Towers, those people did not know that that building was going to collapse, or they were in danger. They wouldn't be living there. So that's kind of a little bit the concern here. How do you navigate all this?
But
Well,
maybe,
let me
I just want to say, sorry. I don't know that people in the building knew that the engineering report was, you know, waving red flags saying these are huge problems. I don't think they were aware. And maybe
Right.
if you read the minutes and you see what's been going on in the meetings, you'll know that there's been a big issue. If you ask for the engineering reports,
Right.
these are all things that I'm now advocating for with my buyers. I frankly didn't know to ask for engineering reports before.
So you think, Joel, that in these minutes you would have found these answers, like, you know?
Not that the building is going to collapse, but there is imminent danger. I mean, they said those reports were saying from the engineer, Morbido, whatever, was saying that there was a huge problem that needed to be addressed.
It sounds to me like we need someone. We need to come.
I've got a question for Greg about construction. If I may, sorry to interrupt. Greg,
Go ahead, Chris.
Greg,
go ahead.
a quick question. Various media has shown photographs of some of these columns under the pool or in the garage of Champlain South were improperly using rebar, too closely bundled together, surrounded by concrete, not properly structured. Would one of your investigations been able to discover that? Or is this something that the developer / builder contractor, I understand that this developer changed builders 2 or maybe 3 times during construction. It looks to me like there was something going wrong during the construction process of this building. Could you have discovered that in later time? Would you have done an X-ray of these columns to be able to find that?
The short answer is no. The 40-year recertification is not something where you're going to go in with an X-ray and look at all the steel rebar. That's just not going to happen. No engineer that I know has done that. It's basically an inspection where it's a visual inspection. If you see any red flags, you call them out.
So wait, let me interrupt for a second. So a Surfside building inspector who had been out there looking at this before the pour of the cement around the rebar would have seen this improper structure.
Well, I don't know what the inspector saw. I don't know if he went into the garage. I myself in 2017 went to the building and they hired me to do something on the deck. Never went into the garage. If I would have gone down there, I would have told them, look, you've got a serious problem. Then the year afterwards, when they hired Morabito. But let me frame your question, because your question is simple on the surface, but it's extremely complicated. Now, I'm going to go to the core question, which is, should I be scared of my building? And after Surfside, I've got many phone calls of people asking that rudimentary and logical question. And, and there are safeguards, like the gentleman that was asking, there are safeguards in place. Let's start with designing the building. You have, licensed professionals that are supposed to design to the code. They hand in the plans to the building department. You've got licensed professionals over there that, make comments on them, make sure that it's designed correctly. When the construction begins, you've got the contractor who's supposed to know what they're doing, and they're supposed to build as per the plans. Then you've got the special inspector that is hired by the city to oversee the construction. On top of that, you've got inspectors from the city looking at that. So you've got many levels of oversight on any construction, considerable construction, like as you see there. Then after it's done, you've got inspections from the fire department, from the city. You've got these 40-year recertifications, which are absolutely key. So yes, there are safeguards in place. What happens is that there's a breakdown, and I'll go back to my original statement, which is money, reserves. There's only so much that a building, a board member who doesn't know much about, buildings, but they do know that, hey, you're supposed to paint your building every 5 years, or every 6 or 7, every 7 years. There is a fault there. That's one of the places where the chain link is weak. So I honestly think that's the place where it should go. But here in the United States, nobody should be walking into a building thinking, oh my God, is this building going to fall? Or am I unsafe in this building?
It sounds to me like, Greg, you need to start a company that realtors can refer their customers to that will evaluate the structural integrity of a building, not do a full recertification, but kind of look through what's been done in terms of permits and work on a building and give a buyer an opinion on the integrity of a building.
Yeah, we do that all day long. We do reserve studies. We do 40-year recertifications. We do structural inspections.
So if we have a buyer that wants to buy in an older building, can we go to you, and for a fee, you'll give them an idea of how good the building is structurally?
I do that day in and day out. Yeah.
What does that cost approximately?
It depends on what it is. My most basic inspection for example, for a house is $450, and it goes up from there.
Right, but this is not a house. If you want to buy in a building,
I understand that, but I'm giving you a starting frame point.
Okay.
So yeah, if it's a house, it's $450. Now, if the house has a crawl space, it goes up from there. $900 for a building, for example, a 10-story building with a parking garage, you can go up to $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and from there it keeps going up.
And what would you do? You'd actually go and physically inspect the building, or you would look in city and look at what's been done and what permits have been pulled, etc.
No, we would just go and look at the building. Now, if
You
we
go to
have
the
to go
building.
to yes, we would go look at the building, because right there,
Okay.
the building tells you. I mean, we're trained to look at the cracks, where the cracks are, what directions they are, how big they are,
Okay.
and the different things that we're trained to be able to pick up on those red flags. But what you're talking about is something that may probably have to be done to be included as part of some sort of standard report, because that documentation is so important. The reserve studies and all these other things that Danielle was talking about.
Right. I think
But I
think
think Jeff is suggesting that we do this, and I think maybe it's not a bad idea. Like, we do an inspection on the condo itself, the interior. Nobody ever thought of doing an inspection on the building.
right. You have a buyer for a condo. It's $1 million. It's an older
Right.
building. We're not qualified to determine,
right.
and the buyers are not qualified as well. So we go and we pay X dollars. I don't know if $3,000 to $5,000 is going to be reasonable, but maybe the associations hire a guy like you once a year, once every 5 years, whatever it is, to hand out to every potential buyer of a building. I think that this is going to evolve, but
Right.
it's going to have to go there at some point.
And
Because-
I've been talking to insurance professionals. I actually did a seminar with them about 2 weeks ago, and told them that maybe the insurance industry needs to be involved, maybe up to a certain point, because the same way that we do 3-point inspections for houses, maybe there's a 5-point inspection, or whatever you want to call it, for condos, where if you do these inspections, you get a break on your
Right.
insurance or something like that. And you know, I was talking about that, you know, and with all these insurance agents, and they were all nodding their heads. That's never going to happen because of this, and that.
Guess who the #1 insurance provider is for condominium associations? You got
State
it.
of Florida.
Citizens has 85% of the policies throughout the state for condo buildings. So we, the taxpayers, the ones. The other thing I want to mention real quick, because this has come up, you know, this is obviously post Surfside, but for those who are paying Greg to go out and do these reports on structural integrity, and the board is commissioning the reports, they're not sharing it with the unit owners. And we just had a story on Saturday. A gentleman named Robert, he lives in Champlain Towers East. And he said specifically after the building collapsed, it caused a crack in one of their columns that he found out from the maintenance guy. And so they did hire an engineer to come out and make sure that everything is fine. And so he's asked for a copy of the report. They won't give it to him. This is the second time in this week that I've heard, and it was in the chat as well. People are saying they're not turning over those reports. He has got a letter from Becker, who's their attorney, you know, basically telling him to back off. So those are the type of stories that we are collecting. And I've asked him for that letter so that we can share it with the legislature, because that's a real compelling story to turn over, you know, what they are finding through Greg's reports. Turn them over to the unit owners, turn them over to the future buyers, and let them know the real condition of what's happening in these buildings.
And I get calls all the time for people such as the gentleman you're talking about. Hey, you know, you did an inspection, get me the report. And I said, who are you? I'm not on the board. Well, I'm sorry, I can't give it to you. You weren't the one who paid for it. I'd be breaking certain rules. But yeah, it's a shame, and I feel bad that I cannot provide them this important information.
That should be provided by the boards to all owners.
It's on our list.
Yeah,
it's on our list to address.
Okay, guys,
we could go information, even financials. Impossible.
That needs to change. Guys, we could go all night. This is a huge topic, and I think we're going to see a lot of evolution happening here, and we may want to revisit it in a bit. I want to thank all of our panelists. You guys were fantastic. Wealth of information. Thank you so much. And I'd like to pass the baton to Ileana, our chairperson, superstar extraordinaire. And thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle, Jeff, Joel, and Greg. Thank you so much. The information has been incredibly enlightening. We truly appreciate your time and attention. And at this time, I would like to bring up and welcome Annie Alexander, my friend and master broker, who tragically lost her brother and sister-in-law in the Champlain Tower collapse. As you might expect, the past few months have been extraordinarily difficult for Annie and her family, and she has been kind enough to accept our invitation today to share her thoughts and reflections on this matter. Annie, I speak for everyone here when I express my deepest condolences for your loss and my admiration for your courage to be here today with us.
Thank you.
Master Broker, please welcome Annie.
Thank you all. I really appreciate Ileana and the Master Broker Forum for your support, for the beautiful flowers you sent our family, everything that we received during these early moments when we didn't know anything, just gave us some hope and uplifted everything that we were going through. It's still very hard, very raw, and but we're being very strong and thinking always positive, because we cannot question why things happen like this, right? So the past few months it's been very painful, but like I said, we're moving forward through, but we carry it with our strong faith and support from friends, family, colleagues like you. So much outpouring of love that I am totally grateful for. I thank Greg for the insight, and Danielle and Joel for all the information you have provided. I mean, so much wealth of information for us as realtors, and we're so much responsible to advise our clients correctly. And at this time, you know, we hope that that the future legislation and many rules may change in order to prevent this from happening again. This is so surreal. I mean, who would think that a building could collapse in today's world? But, you know, As you see, it's like a 9/11 for us. So if you're able to, please contribute to support surfside.org, which has been very instrumental in helping those families that were impacted by the collapse, especially those that had to leave and they're still, you know, struggling to find a place to live, etc. It would be grateful, appreciated. And I thank you all, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Annie. We truly appreciate you joining us tonight. Please know that your friends and colleagues are here for you. So we're here to support you always. This concludes our discussion tonight. Thank you all, MBF members, especially Jeff for doing an outstanding job as usual. Chairs Donna Bloom, Ralph DiMartino, Pat Parker, and Chris Zoller for guiding us through this important discussion tonight. Thank you for attending and participating. Please watch your inbox for the recap email that Jason will be sending out, which will include a video of today's discussion, as well as the materials, websites, and links that Danielle has also shared with us. Thank you and good night.